Good evening everyone and welcome back to Woodcrafter's Corner. In today's video we're going to start off a big series on how to whittle an entire chess set, and we're going to start with the pawn. So this is what I've decided for my design. It's kind of this rough looking geometric almost style. It's pretty small. Overall this is about 1 inch tall, and I've cut it from a blank that is 1 inch wide and 1 1/4 inches tall. So that is what we're working with here. So from this to this is what we'll get done by the end of this video. Now, of course, the pawn is only the start. We're going to be working through every piece and then eventually the chess board as well. But let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to make it look like this, but first, safety is key. Put on your glove if you have one, or whatever guards you use, or if you like to live dangerously, don't wear a glove, I guess, but I recommend it. So the first thing we need to do, of course, to get from this to this is to round it out. So we need to take off all the corners. So that's what we'll do first. Very straightforward. Be careful as you're cutting down here. And it's all right to take off quite a bit at first because, well, we need it kind of rounded. Plus, the more you take off now, within reason, the easier it'll be to whittle down to that smaller kind of shape that we had. So that's the first step, getting rid of those corners, and we're just going to refine that a little bit. Now you'll notice that the base is still quite a bit smaller than the overall shape, so it's all right if we want to take off a little bit more even around the edges here. And in fact, what I'm going to do is just a little outline here for my own sake. Once you get several pawns made, or even just one, I guess, because obviously you're going to need quite a few if you're doing both halves of the chess set. You can do this as well, as long as you like the design of your first one. Just make an outline, and then that'll give you an idea of how much you need to cut out. Now, obviously, since the base is the widest part, I'm starting here, but it's all right if it goes inward a little bit towards the top, like so. Point is, keep it loose. Don't worry too much about it. This design is super nice because it doesn't require you to be symmetrical, for one thing. Just a little bit, but nothing crazy. So that way, you know, if you mess up, it's just basically the beginner's style that I really like. And because it's really hard to make every pawn look the same, or every chess set, all the pieces look the same, then this design also allows for some variation, and it still looks like you intentionally made it that way. Which, you know, if you think about it, you did. All right, so obviously we still have some corners to take out here, or I should say angles, but that is the main part of what we're working with here. So that's the basic piece. Now, as you can see, we have a couple of different ways we can go about this. What I like to do is take a pencil and just make a mark where I want a certain place to be. So obviously we have the base up through here. So why don't we go ahead and make a mark? And this is just a rough placement. Doesn't have to be perfect. There, and then we'll make one here. Just as you can see, I'm just dragging across. So we have basically two sections. The part where whatever this is meets the base here, and then where we'll cut out for the head of the pawn, I guess you could call it. So that's where in between we need to take out a little bit more material than down here, obviously, and then we need to just work our way up. So let's start with that. Now, since this doesn't have to be perfect, it's easy to just make this mark all the way around. And I just make it relatively big so it, you know, it meets up on the other side, okay? There we go. Simple as that. You can refine this as you go. Do the same thing over here. And there we go. So that just gives us an idea. So what I'm going to do is go around and kind of what I did with the pencil, just make some deeper cuts. This is most important at the base here because we're not going to make the base any narrower than this. We're going to take out more material up here, but around the base, we're pretty much going to leave it as is and just make it slanted, and you'll see what I mean by that. So I'll go around again. The deeper you make the cut now, the easier it'll be, because you won't have to do this again and again as often. But you still will, that's fine. All right, so that's that down. Now what we'll go ahead and do is just start taking out some more chunks here. Go kind of shallow here. As you can see, I'm not going too deep because I haven't made the cut that deep yet. And we want to be very careful, because if we go deeper than where we made our stop cut down here, then we risk taking off this entire chunk. And you know, you can recover from that with these, because again, they're not terribly symmetrical, but better to avoid it. So I'm just going all the way around, really slowly, really controlled. And as you can see, I went a little too deep on that one, and that's why that one didn't just snap up. That's all right in this case, because I was going so slow, it didn't matter. Same thing there. So when that starts happening, it's time to make the cut deeper. So we're just gonna travel around again. Try to move your blade flush up against the stopping point here, because it's easy as you're going around to start moving off in this direction, and well, that's not what you want. So just don't do it. All right, no point in going around too many times. Just start doing this again. All right, so that's about as deep as we're going to make it for now, because we're going to have to come in at some point and slant this anyway. Let's move on to here. So obviously this line we drew, but really it's not going to be terribly useful for us right now, because we're just going to keep taking off more material up here now that we know what their base is. But at least it gives us an idea of the proportions and how far apart we want them to be. And that's one of the big reasons you don't need to focus too much on making that line. Really either line in the first place. You could do this all eyeball it if you want, but I just prefer the little extra guideline at first. One thing that's a little bit tricky with small pieces like this is that, well, it's really small, so it can be a little difficult to get in there. You'll notice I'm using a lot of this type of pivoting cut, because you don't want to start pushing too hard here. You'll lose control of it really easy on something this small. So I'm not taking off as much as I guess technically could be, but that's a good thing, because the more controlled you are, especially with something this size, the better. And so you can see we're really narrowing it down, but if I compare, we still have quite a long ways to go, but that's all right. All right, so one point of reference you can use as you start to get a little bit closer to the correct dimensions here, or at least the dimensions that I used, is obviously we have to have the top coming to a point. So we need this all around here to be gone. And since we know we need to take out so much, we can use this mark here where I've started kind of the midpoint of the head. Again, the nature of this design just means that you can really change this as you go. But let's say I made that mark, I can come in and start taking off some more. Being very careful here, because as close as I am to the edge, it's easy to take off more than you intended, since we're going kind of with the grain here. All right, now since we have that kind of in place, sort of, we can come back and keep taking off some more through the body. And so I'm gonna make another mark here, another cut I should say. Pushing relatively hard. I am supporting underneath with my fingers. So now I can make some more cuts like this. And as you get more comfortable, you can start taking off more. But don't get too crazy with it. You can step back occasionally and look at the base and see how close you are to keeping it relatively symmetrical. You don't want it to be too off center on the base that you're making. So we're just going to continue like this. Just keep taking off some more, until you're at a spot where you feel good about it. You can make your pawn a little bit wider, smaller, narrower, shorter, taller, whatever you want. For my overall chess set that I'm going to be making, the about 1 inch size or so works well for the pawns, because obviously you have to kind of make the rest of the pieces in proportion, and it's just easier to start with the pawns because there's so many of them. And also you don't want to make them too tall, because then you have to make everything else too tall, and I don't want to waste necessarily material, and I don't want the chess set to be too big. So that's my reasoning behind the sizing here. But if it's you want to make them smaller, you want to make your entire chess set bigger, that's totally fine. And you may find that it evolves as you carve. That's also fine. The point is, don't overthink it, and this is the perfect way to get into kind of whittling at your own style. So here's where we are so far. Getting closer. Let's go ahead and make this mark again. And I'm going to start doing that. There's that, and then the midpoint here I'm going to do as well. Kind of like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make this other notch down here. It's almost like a candlestick, or a candle, I guess you could say, because it's like the head of the pawn is a flame and the rest of it is the candlestick with the base. So this will be the top of the candlestick. Why did I feel the need to make that comparison? I don't know. It's just the way my brain works sometimes, all right? Now with this one, where we've made the 2 marks here, we want to come in at this angle because we need to take out this material, this band of material right here. So I'm going in pretty sharply here. Just be careful. So that's what we've got. Gets caught on my glove. Starts to take out a little bit there. So this is good. We're just going to keep doing that. Now we don't want to take out too much to start, because we're going to need to make some more adjustments towards the top of it, and the narrower we make the bottom part of the top, so to speak, the more likely it is to break off as we're working. So always leave as much as you can as you're still working. And it sounded like I had a follow-up to that, but I do not. Now my overall goal here is to reach a point at the top, just like this. So that's why I'm gonna just keep moving around here, taking off more and more, because this is still way too wide. All right, so we're starting to get to the point where we need to make these bigger cuts like this. If you want to make yours look like mine, that is. So what we need to do is pick. Now I have made mine to where it has 5 corners here. So if you want to make yours look like mine, just pick any side, doesn't matter, and just take out a big chunk. But again, go slow. Here we go. I'm just going real slow here. Okay, so that's going to be one side, and we can make that deeper as we go. Then when you go to your next side, don't necessarily, unless you want, you can for sure, don't go at a angle like this. Go at a slightly less of an angle because we want 5 total angles. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so there's 2. Then come over here, cut in. There's 3. There's 4. Now, I might have made those a little too close together. That's all right because we're still working on it. There we go. Let's make this one a little deeper. Yeah, it's made that angle too small. That's okay. So there's where we're getting at. You can see it coming together here. So now, if you reach a situation like this, obviously this side is really wide. This one's really narrow, really small. So just instead of making another mark here, just along this angle, just slide your knife over like this and take out a little bit more. Okay, and then just keep working. Take a look from the top to see if it's all off center, and I need to take out more on this side. Now on this one, now on this one. This is the part I spend kind of the longest working on because I think it's arguably the coolest shape. Here we go, getting close. All right, that's good enough for now. We can always sharpen that up if we want. And so here we are, similar shape, but as you can see, there's still quite a bit more to do. And all we have to do to give it this separation right here is now just pick any point you want. You can make it as close to the base here as you want. Mine's a little bit kind of like 2/3 above and 1/3 below. Maybe a 1/4 down here and 3/4 up here, whatever you want it to do. Literally just do whatever you want. But first we have to make this a little deeper, because we also still need to take off material down here. So I'm just pushing that in, making that cut deeper. Let's go ahead and take off some more right now. One thing you'll see is that you don't want to take off more material down here than is up here. At least if you want to make yours like mine. Because actually, the base is the same width as the head, just an extra section taken out there. So don't take off too much around the base if you want yours to look like mine. All right, so that's good enough for now. Let's do the same thing on this now to make it all even. Okay, looking good. Now there's a Another step here, as we know, and that is to take out this section. So let's do one part to start out with. I'm going to go along the same angle and make a cut here. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, this angle, do that. There we go, starting to take shape. This angle now. I'm basically making one cut per side. All right, so as you can see, we're getting there. Now this one's a little bit higher up than this one is, for example, so you can make that a little deeper. Personally, I do want this part of it, to be a little more symmetrical. Now be very careful, the thinner you make this neck, I guess you could call it, because it's going to be way too easy to just be pushing, cutting like this, and then this whole thing just pops right off. I say that a lot in my videos because I have done it many times, and while it's possible to just glue it back on, it never is quite the same, you know? Avoid that where you can. That's what I always say. Always. That's why I'm no fun at parties. All right, so we're gonna leave that for now. So here's where we're left. Now the kind of base part has, by comparison, gotten a little bit thicker. So I'm just gonna take off just a little bit, because the way I have done this one, or the way I do these, I don't want it to be a perfect cylinder all the way around. I don't want it to look straight like this. So I'm gonna add a little bit more character, but I can't do that if I take off too much right now. Now you may prefer this look. Maybe you just want it to look straight and symmetrical. If so, that is totally fine. In fact, we're pretty close to being done. If you want, you could take off maybe just a little bit more here, just so it doesn't look ridiculous. And I mean, technically, this could be it for you. This is pretty good, but we can add a little bit more. Narrow that up a little bit, and then we're gonna add the angle here on the base. All right, and here's how we're gonna do that. I'm gonna hold it upside down. I'm gonna go pretty much, I leave a little bit of the flat plane right here, so I don't start at the very bottom to do this. I start at about right here to start, and then I'm gonna make a cut moving towards myself, towards this intersection. Now I'm pointing all this out beforehand because you have to be very careful. You can take off a little bit at a time like this, but as you can see, I'm kind of getting my fingers down on the blade here. I'm not back here. Watch your fingers, of course. I'm making extremely controlled cuts here right now, and I'm holding the knife at an angle, as you can see here. So I'm not straight, I'm not up and down, at an angle, and working towards myself. Now at some point, I'm sure I'll get a comment that asks about my thumb. Yeah, it bends back like that. I don't know what to tell you. It was born that way. Kind of makes it nice, honestly. It may look painful, but it is not. Another reason you want to go really slow here is because if you slip, you probably won't hurt yourself, but you can cut into the main body of the pawn here, and that's just not what we want. Unless, you know, you want kind of a beat up look. That's a style, I guess. Now, as you get closer to the edge here, be more careful because it splinters off easier towards the edge. All right, so we'll go ahead and stop here for now because that's starting to look pretty good. And you do want to stop occasionally and just make sure that you're still kind of keeping it where you want it to be. So there we go. Now, here's where we're comparing the two. This one's just a little bit steeper. Now, if you want to fix that, I don't personally mind it too much that this angle on the base here is a little bit steeper than this one is, but all you have to do, if you want yours a little different, is cut down here just a little bit, not much, and just make your cuts a little bit shallower. The angle a little bit shallower. So you can see what I'm doing here. Now for my own personal preference, that is looking pretty good. All right, so if we want to compare them, they're looking almost identical now. And you could leave it like this, but me, I'm just gonna go in there and make some random cuts in here to make it look a little bit crazy, just like this one. So all I do, make some cuts however you think would be kind of artistic and cool. Take off a little more here. I like to make every part of the base square with the angles up top. So I think it looks cool. Okay. And then I'm gonna just make another mark here. This is all just, it's really random. So here are the two, and you can hardly tell which one I just did because they look so similar. Or maybe you can. This is the one we just did. So there you go, keeping them consistent. And as we get to making just a ton more of these, I've got 2. I only have to make 14 more. And so there you have it. That's how to make the first piece of our chess set, which is the pawn. And just keep working at it. You only have to make 16 of these. And by the end, you're going to be an expert at making pawns. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, we're going to be working on every single piece of the chess set, including the board itself. So be sure to subscribe, like this video if it was helpful for you. And if you're making your own on your own journey, definitely leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. But again, check out the other pieces, which will be coming very shortly. And as always, thanks for watching.